Welcome to NightLight. Step away from the mainstream and gather around as we enlighten the world and our realities and travel this cosmic journey we call life. Join us as we share with you and provide that beacon that can guide us all to a better way. Explore with us as we examine a metaphysical montage of spiritual insights, covering everything from the mundane to the magical, UFOs to unicorns, and everything in between. This is a time of awakening, of sharing and evolving, of spreading our wings and soaring on the cosmic breath of creation. Come and join with other light-minded spirits as we weave our lights together to seek understanding, enlightenment, and, with a little luck, some wisdom. This is NightLight, a reminder that you are never alone.
Good evening, everybody, and welcome to NightLight. We have to thank Ken Quiethawk for that introduction. He has an amazing voice, and he and his wife have a phenomenal website. You can find him at nativestorytellers.com. Please check it out. It's another way of preserving history that most of us have never experienced because we've stuck to the textbooks, which really don't have it all there. So tonight we have a really special guest. We're very excited. Both Mark and I have been cramming all over the place, so we probably have enough for about 5 or 6 hours, but Mark has honed it down. So I'm going to let him get started so that he can share his excitement and his enthusiasm and his special guest with you. So, Mark, welcome to the show.
Yeah, thanks, Barbara. How's your day going?
Day's going fine so far, and now it's getting even better.
Okay. Yeah, it is. Yeah. Let's just maximize our time with our super special guest. And tonight's our second very important show of the week on the hidden history in the Western Hemisphere. This is another show where the audience, like Serenity, the Red Dragon Rider, Miss Woo Woo, the Human Billboard, and Banker Sarah get to enjoy listening in their jammies in the comfort of their own homes, while Barbara and I have a new NSA file started on us. And at any minute, you'll be able to hear the black helicopters straight from the Grand Canyon hovering over the palatial Blog Talk studios. Surprised they aren't here already. But, for the last 3 weeks, our listeners had to choose between listening to NightLight Part 2 live or seeing the inaugural season of the America Unearthed on the Travel Channel. So for our listeners' convenience, we're merging both shows thanks to Katie Alter's assistance. So Scott Wolter is our guest this evening. You know him as the host of the very popular Travel Channel show America Unearthed. He's the author of the Kensington Runestone, the Hooked X, Akhenaten to the Founding Fathers, and the soon-to-be published Cryptic Code. He is also one of my colleagues at Ancient American Magazine. Hi, Scott. Thanks for being our guest tonight.
Well, I'm happy to be here, Mark. I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah, that's right. I think tonight we'll spend a lot of time weaving, the 4 seasons of TV shows that you've done along with your books, and I don't know where this is going to go, but that's kind of like the idea. There's like so much information to discuss, but maybe we could start off the show by looking at the introduction of the introduction that you've had for the entirety of your show that's aired on the History Channel and Travel Channel. That's pretty much the same intro, but you state there's a hidden history in this country that no one knows about, and over the 10 months of shows that Barbara and I have done, we've been finding that your statement is true. Stonehenge, Newgrange, and the pyramids are great, but there's fascinating material much closer to home.
That's right.
So in the 6 or 7 years that you've been traveling around America, how have you grown or become more aware of these intriguing places that are right here?
Well, I've been doing America Unearthed. We've done 49 episodes now. Only 42 of them have aired so far, but I never dreamed when we started this thing that we would end up doing that many shows, and hopefully we'll get a chance to do more because there is a lot more, and it's really a function of a couple things. One is there are certain stories that we've looked into, things like the Kensington runestone, which proves that the Knights Templar came over here long before Columbus established the sanctuary that would eventually become the United States of America. I mean, stories like that have been, no doubt in my mind, intentionally suppressed, right? There are certain forces out there that don't want this story to be told, and there are others that people just would prefer not be told because the way that our country was founded was a particular narrative, and here we are 2.5 centuries later, and quite frankly, why do we have to hide it anymore? I mean, we're here, we're established, it's done. There really, in my mind, isn't a good reason to keep up with this nonsense, but yet it continues. Now, that's one part of the mysteries that we look into. The other is we look at known stories like this coming week's episode is about Jack the Ripper, which except for one small part of the episode, doesn't even take place in the United States, but they're enduring mysteries that have been around for a long time, that people have pondered, that have not been, solved to everybody's satisfaction yet. So, and there's a lot of mysteries that are going on here in the United States that aren't necessarily suppressed, but simply have not been completely figured out yet. So we look at those things as well. But there's just so many things that need to be looked into. It's endless, really, and it's fascinating. It's fun, and I'm really thrilled to be able to do this. It's an honor and a privilege, and more than anything else, it's a lot of fun. It's also intellectually stimulating to investigate these things and try to figure them out. And I think in many cases we do get to the bottom of it. We get the right answer. So I couldn't be happier.
Yeah. Who and why are these topics being suppressed? The migrations of people. That's my next question. But what's the need to suppress this information?
Well, you have, first of all, when the most obvious example of that is the runestone and the Templars coming over to North America, and eventually leading to the founding of the United States of America. I mean, there are certain entities that want a particular narrative of that story to be told. For example, the Roman Catholic Church doesn't want to admit that the Knights Templar leadership were not the good Catholics that everybody just assumed that they were. They want to deny the fact that they were here. They want to deny the fact that they formed a strategic alliance with the Native Americans that were here because they shared a similar ideology, and that ideology was not consistent with church doctrine. In fact, it was diametrically opposed to it. But yet the Templars pretended to be Catholic, and they flourished by keeping their, you keep your friends close, your enemies closer. That's exactly what they did. And the church doesn't want to admit that. My gosh, that makes them look pretty silly. But they've got plenty of other problems to deal with now, and I think it's created an environment now where the truth can come out, and they're not going to silence me. They're not going to silence other people working on this research. And the Native Americans, most importantly, I think are ready to share the knowledge that they know, because they know all about not just the Templars, but all the other cultures that came here and had a presence here and interacted with the natives. I mean, my gosh, why is it that people don't talk to the natives? I mean, if anybody knows the history of this country, it's them, right? And believe me, they do.
Okay, we're going to get into that topic in a little bit, and Barbara's going to probably touch on that when you return next week, and then we have Bill Mann, I think the following week. So the audience is going to get a hefty dose of that kind of information over the next several episodes. But
good. It's important. It's incredible, and it needs to be brought to the world's attention. And I can't stress enough how important it is. And we all know what happened. When we settled this country and colonized. We committed genocide both here and in Canada, and it's finally starting to be acknowledged. And that's how you make progress. And I just think it's great that you guys are bringing this to the world's attention.
Mm-hmm. And a large portion of your written and TV canon deals with several waves of transoceanic migrations to America, and obviously all these people are people arriving in America are having to deal with the various First Nation people, and maybe the first example we should examine is the Solutreans from deep antiquity, and the episode where you and the late great Dennis Stanford got together at the Smithsonian, and you're looking at one of the artifacts that he's having you examine. Can you tell us a little bit about that meeting? I mean, you got two big name scientists in the same room, so we just want to be a fly on the wall to hear how that went.
Well, as you're probably well aware, the Smithsonian Institution has not been a big fan of me for a long time, and it started with my work on the runestone, and they consider me persona non grata. But when we approached them with the production team, we're making a TV show that they have to conduct themselves professionally, and it wouldn't have played very well for them to deny us access to somebody that is within their institution that was perfectly willing to deal with this, and Dennis was absolutely delightful, and I think we should show our respects to his family and his friends that he passed away in April after apparently fighting a battle with cancer, and I was sad to hear that, but in any case, he was wonderful, and we spent a half a day with him, and he couldn't have been more gracious and helping me understand certain things, and he was just a terrific guest, and we got along great. So it was wonderful, and his ideas have not, especially in the outset, were not, accepted by a lot of his contemporaries. People that were married to the whole Clovis ideas, and this idea of the Solutreans coming 10,000 years earlier and longer ago to North America from the east, right? That was heretical in the archaeological field. But he followed the evidence. He looked at the artifacts, and he developed a very plausible thesis that made all the sense in the world, and it's bared out to be true. So, some people will say that's brave and that's going against the grain. Well, I guess that's true, but my goodness, people have said that about me, and I just go, wait a minute, I just followed the evidence. That's exactly what Dennis did. And when you follow the evidence, it will lead you to the truth. I mean, that's just a basic principle of scientific method. It's about the facts, and his facts were irrefutable, and he was right.
Yeah, I think your adjective to describe Dennis as gracious is an accurate characteristic of him. The one day I got to spend with him, I got that impression too. He's a very, very intelligent man and an inspirational person. I was just sorry to hear of his passing as well. But I think, it's just interesting where he presents this follows the evidence and is gets a lot of recognition for his contributions to prehistoric studies and understanding of America. You do the same thing, and you're criticized. Barbara and I are like that too. So we're in the same boat. But is Dennis? Saying that like 20,000 BC that there's naval engineering going on to get from the east across the Atlantic, or
no? I mean, I'm sure that they had vessels that they were using, but they didn't travel across the North Sea in boats. They did it across the ice. I mean, he said they were basically following the seal herds and to the west along the edge of the ice. So they're essentially living on the ice and moving across the ice and following the seal herds and making their way here. So, but like I said, they probably had vessels that they used to go out off the ice, I suspect. I mean, I don't know for sure, but that would make sense to me. And, that was his basic thesis. And, I'm sure that there were other things that were going on. Maybe they had rivals that were forcing them out of their, historical territories, and they had to, they had to move on. But you have to have food, and if you live along the sea and you develop a certain diet and techniques for capturing, your dinner. If they migrate and move, you got to move with them. So I suspect a lot of that was going on too, and that's sort of the general general thesis that he had, and it made sense to me. Made perfect sense.
Mhm. Yeah, it does, and then one of your episodes deals with the Kennewick Man who's coming from the other side of the country, from Japan to the West Coast. It's just the opposite of the Solutreans. That was a really interesting episode. What this skeleton was found, basically exposed in a stream or creek bank or stream.
Yeah, it was along, or I forget the name of the river. It wasn't the Columbia River, but I think it flowed into the Columbia. I might be wrong about that. I can't remember, but in any case, it was just a young guy, a college guy, who was out watching the powerboat races, and he was, drinking beers with his buddy, having a good time. I mean, back in college, that went on. I remember probably a time or two we went to sporting events, may have had a beer or two, but in any case, he found this skull on the edge of the water, and I think when he first pulled it up, he thought it was something else, and he didn't realize it was a human skull till later. And then they went, eventually it got turned in. He took it into the authorities, and he thought maybe he had found a murder victim or something, and then they thought it was Native American, and then they did C14, and they realized this isn't, this might be Native American, but it's a hell of a lot older than anybody thought. And so he took them back to the site, and they excavated it, and they found more of the skeleton. And it was simply just weathering out of the hillside. It was an ancient burial, but it showed, traits of being Polynesian. So, how did the Polynesians get here? That whole thing. But they traveled by boat, for crying out loud, and they were master sailors and navigators, and they traveled literally thousands of miles across the oceans in the South Pacific. And why not? Why couldn't they have made it to the West Coast? They made it everywhere else. It's so funny when you talk to some of these archaeologists and anthropologists and historians that want to stick to, I don't know whose accepted narrative it's supposed to be, but it's almost like they would have you believe that there was a fence around the continent. Nobody gets in and nobody got out, and it was up there for, thousands of years. I mean, it's silly when you think about it. It doesn't even pass the smell test as far as I'm concerned.
So, and what the Kennewick Man was something like 10,000 years after the Solutreans? Is that somewhere around the general time frame?
No, I don't think it was. God, I'd have to look it up. I could probably just Google it, but I think it was around 10,000. Solutrean goes back, my gosh, 18, 20, 21, even as far back as 25,000 years, as I recall. So you're talking about, Kennewick Man is, the big thing with Kennewick Man is that it had Polynesian features and didn't really fit, genetically with the indigenous population that was believed to have been there at that time.
Yeah, was there another skeleton nearby? Was he from a little necropolis? Do we know that, or was it just a isolate? It seems like it was an isolated.
It was an isolated skeleton that was found.
Okay.
Where there's one, there's probably going to be another one somewhere. The other thing is this guy had multiple wounds that had in his body and that had healed over. I know that there was I think it was an obsidian point that was embedded in his hip or something. It was, God, it's been so long since I've even thought about this. I apologize for not having all my details straight, but I remember that he showed a number of examples or evidence of trauma that he experienced in his life and survived. Many broken bones and, that spear point that was found. I think it was in his hip.
Interesting. Okay, so and we have the we have Dennis Stone tuned in tonight, and we have to at least mention the megalithic mariners possibly coming to America's Stonehenge, or you are making an annual pilgrimage there around the winter solstice. What do you get out of the visits to America's Stonehenge? Is this something that is one of the first megalithic sites built in America from European immigrants?
Well, let's put it this way. I don't think we have, reached a definitive conclusion as to who exactly built America's Stonehenge. I mean, we make the assumption that it's European, and it probably is. I think one of the reasons that people think that is because the local indigenous people, basically what they say, and I'm paraphrasing, is we didn't build this place. This isn't what we do. They say this place is haunted. I mean, I've heard natives that I've been there with say that. And, I mean, if they didn't build it, if it wasn't Native Americans that built it, then it has to be somebody that came from somewhere else. And exactly who that is, we just don't know. But clearly they understood astronomy and, megalithic sites and, and tracking the sun, the moon, the planets, the stars, the constellations. But this is something that's universal. This has been going on throughout time. These people weren't the first to do this, and they better not be the last, as far as I'm concerned. It's amazingly complex, and I think we're just beginning to understand, what's happening there. So. It's just an incredible site, but it's probably some European site. But you know what's really interesting, Mark, and this brings up a point that there's plenty of trolls and negative blog sites that are, I guess I would just call them hate blog sites, that attack anything and everything that we do. And they have, a certain number of relatively small followers, but they are very nasty. And one of the things that I've been accused of, and I've been accused of by archaeologists, academics have called me racist because I dare suggest that, Europeans were responsible for certain things that we find in this country. And the reason I'm racist is because I'm by default, I guess, I'm saying that Native Americans weren't intelligent enough to do these things. And, I mean, it's the most ridiculous thing I've ever heard. But yet, this is what I hear. I still hear it. A guy came on my blog site and tried to, make that argument. I didn't post the comment because if it's a hate thing, I won't post it. But,
right.
I mean, think about that. That's what we've been reduced to. We can't have a intelligent discussion. You have to accuse us of racism because I have to tell you, are you trying to tell me that Native Americans built the Newport Tower? That Native Americans carved the Kensington runestone, the Spirit Pond runestones, the Back Creek stone, the Tucson lead art? Native Americans did that? Really? Boy, oh boy, that's a pretty bold claim, if you ask me.
Scott, you do see it in Squire and Davis's book where they are talking with a chief, just say around the Chillicothe area, and they document that they asked him who built these mounds along the Scioto River. And you did a show on that with the menorah-looking one, and they do document in their book that the chiefs did say, my people didn't build this. So it's not. You have the native people saying that we aren't responsible.
Are you
that's not
claiming now
racist.
then, Mark, that these Native Americans are racist?
No,
I'm joking.
No.
I'm joking.
No, they're just.
No, I mean, you get the
they're
point.
just
I mean,
not
it's
taking.
like, okay, now you got the natives saying that they didn't build it. Well, for crying out loud, it's like if
Then
they
who
say
did?
it, it's okay, but if I say it, it's being racist. I mean, it's just nonsense,
Yeah.
you know.
It is.
No, look, it's just like Stonehenge. The natives that we've talked to, they said the same thing. So this isn't what we do. We don't do this stuff. I mean, we track the movement of the stars and we practice archaeoastronomy, but this isn't the way that we do it. So, if not them, then who did?
Yeah, and you do have examples of like the megalithic yard being found at America's Stonehenge, like at the sacrificial table. Maybe a few other examples.
Well,
you
know
also
what?
have
when somebody starts to take this site seriously, when academics and scholars, pull their heads out of their rear end and take a look at this site, I mean, what are they afraid of? I mean, my God, this is a virtually untouched site as far as research goes by academics. I mean, people could make a name for themselves if they would just, get away from worrying about this narrative that they can't buck in any way. They have to follow. I mean, for crying out loud, that's the antithesis of what scholarly research is about. I mean, it's just crazy. I mean,
right.
And they're going to find a lot more there. They'll discover things that a lot of us researchers that have been looking at certain aspects of it will never see, and we need their help. They need to come together and get off the schneid and help us out.
Well, you have the ibex petroglyph, which does not represent any kind of white-tailed deer or anything here in America. It looks more like some kind of antelope, which wasn't showing up in America at all. It's. I think a lot of people just want to know who give credit to the people who build it, and it's not being racist.
Of course it isn't. I mean, it's nonsense. We just want to figure out what happened. I mean, cultures were going back and forth for thousands of years to other continents. Of course they were doing it here. I mean, it's just silly to try to suggest that didn't happen. I really, honestly don't know why they even try to put it off. It's and what's interesting. And when I first got involved in this, I didn't know anything about forbidden history or anything like that. I was just doing my work, and I came up with the Kensington Runestone. I presented my findings, and I thought to myself, good for them, they got one, and I was ready to move on. And I started getting all this pushback, and people complaining, and I said to myself, well, okay, where did I screw up? What are your questions? What is it that you don't understand? I'll help you understand it, and heaven forbid, if I made a mistake, I'll fix it, okay? Because it's not about me being right. It's about getting the right answer. It's what I do for a living. I've been doing it 34 years now, and so I was perfectly happy to entertain these questions, but I figured out pretty quickly that they weren't complaining about it or looking at mistakes. They just didn't like the answer. Well, I'm sorry about that if you don't like the answer, but tough hop, man. The data is the data, the results are the results, and I don't make it up for anybody. And just because you don't like it doesn't mean it's not valid. So when they can't attack the evidence, what's the fallback position? They attack the messenger, and that's what they're doing. And I mean, it's not going to work because the data's not going anywhere. The facts are the facts, and the conclusions are the conclusions, and that's it. It's all done.
And yeah, speaking of the dates you just mentioned, you bring up the Templars in the hooked X and Akhenaten to the founding fathers, and it's in your TV shows, and you have a bunch of dates that all kind of cluster around like the same generation. Was the Kensington runestones what 1362, in the Spirit Pond runestone
1400.
Well, like 1400. Yeah,
1401,
that's really not
1402.
Okay, yeah, that's not, 40, about 40 years isn't big difference. But it shows that there's some like Christian timekeeping type people coming to North America, bringing that idea with them between this 1360 and 1400. Okay, these are all the Templar people coming to America. For what reason?
Well, I think it's pretty simple why they were coming. I mean, look at it this way. What was happening with the Templars in 1307? Their order was put down for by who? The King of France, the monarchies of Europe, and the Roman Catholic Church, right? And
right.
I mean, they arrested them, they tortured them, and they burned them. So why are they going to stick around here? On top of that, you've also got plagues ravaging through Europe. They had every incentive to get out of Dodge, and they had the money, they had the boats, they were master navigators, and they had the ideology that was compatible with the people that they interacted here. They formed a strategic alliance. The natives have told us that. They have flat out said. They call the Templars their blood brothers. So what happened? Okay, so they put the runestone down as a land claim, right? And then they passed the obligation on to modern Freemasons, or to the tradition that is within Freemasonry. Not all Freemasons are part of this. It's a very small, important faction. But it's also a fact that all of our founding fathers, all of them, were Freemasons. They knew about the Templar story. They probably also knew about the Templar land claim. And when you think about it, they fought a revolution against who? The monarchs of Europe. Does that ring a bell? And one of the tenets that we have in this country is freedom of religion, right? People seem to think that we are a Christian country. No, we're not. We are not a Roman Christian country. We absolutely are anything but that. Now, you can be a Roman Christian. That's perfectly fine. That is exactly what our founding fathers intended. But you can also be Muslim. You can be Jewish. You can be Buddhist. Native Americans can honor their deity any way they want. Because at the end of the day, every one of these religions, their deity, regardless of what you call it, we're all talking about the same thing, right?
Yeah, it's all the same God.
Exactly. So why is it that, we have to have, some people's, their religion is better and they're going to persecute somebody else because they don't believe the same thing? I mean, it's nonsense. And within Freemasonry, we don't care what you call your God. We just ask that you believe in one, and treat people the way you want to be treated. It's just the basic human stuff that we all should be doing. The problem is religion, organized religion, just is taking itself a little too seriously, in my opinion. But I mean, if you stop back and look at the main tenets of what this country was founded upon and the people who did it, it goes back directly to the Templars and the persecution from the monarchs of Europe and the Roman Catholic Church. I mean, if people can't see that, it's so obvious, and it's just been kept under wraps. And in my new book, I flesh this out completely, and there's going to be some evidence that people are going to see for the first time that absolutely proves this is what happened. But logically, I don't know how people can't see it. I just don't. And you know, today when you look at how caustic and divisive our politics are on both sides of the aisle, you know, it's so disappointing. I think people need a reminder, and that's really what I say in my lectures now, my new lectures, is I remind people where we came from. What our Constitution is a Masonic document. Did you know that?
Mm-hmm. Most of the signers of the Declaration of Independence and the Constitution were Freemasons, and you know their ideas were incorporated in it.
Absolutely. 53 of the 56 signers were Master Masons. Almost all of them. And so, but why don't we ever hear about that? Why don't we hear that Masonic principles are systemic all the way through our Constitution? We brag about the Constitution all the time. Both sides do, right? But yet they don't acknowledge that it's Masonic in its origin, and that it was Freemasons who created it and created this country. And with those tenets, freedom of religion. Boy, you sure don't see that nowadays, do you?
If you know, I'm sure there are people in Congress and the senators who are Masons, but they aren't following the same ideas as Ben Franklin and James Madison and you know, the other
George Washington, Thomas
Masons.
Jefferson, Paul Revere, all of them. Look, there are very few, if any, Freemasons in Congress and in the Senate and in government in Washington today. I don't know exactly how many, but I will tell you, in my opinion, not enough. And I can guarantee you one thing. If we had more Masons in government, we would have a higher probability of people making decisions in the interest of the greater good than the personal good. Because right now all that's happening in Congress and the Senate is the personal good. I mean, let's be honest, okay? Trump's tax cuts did nothing but help the wealthy. I run a business. We made money off the tax cut. Did we pass it down to our employees? Well, we like to think so, but not really. The people that own the companies just made more money, and they had more money so that they could, you know, donate to politicians' campaigns. I mean, it's an incestuous system that is not, in my mind, is not the right thing for our country. That money could be better spent in other places. Now, we have to be fiscally responsible, no question about it. But I just think we need to get back to where we started. We've just gone off track. That's my personal opinion.
No. I do agree with you there, and I think that's. We don't need to get into politics, but you clearly made your point. But you're also talking about other aspects of the evidence that people might be able to see. And when we had Bill Mann on, he was talking about some of these like European type castles found along the Nova Scotia shoreline, and you cover probably the most important Freemasonic structure in New England, the Newport Tower. Is all those are all these structures are still visible, but you get a lot of people saying, "Oh, the Newport Tower is just a windmill," but you're providing a lot more evidence in your book, The Hooked X, about the like eight
columns, 8 columns,
pillars it stands. Yeah, like a columns that it stands on, and 2 stories, and it seems like it's a replica of the Church of the Sepulchre over
Holy Sepulchre,
Jesus.
right?
Okay, can you tell us a little bit about that, please?
Well, the architecture of the Newport Tower is spot on, consistent. I mean, it's an exact replication of the round 2-story round church architecture used by the Knights Templar. Look, all you have to do is Google the Chirola at Tomar, at the Convent of Christ Castle in Tomar, Portugal. The Chirola, the 2-story round church Chirola there, built by the Knights Templar, is exactly the same as the Newport Tower. I mean, if you Google it, you look at it, the only difference is it's inside and it's fully illuminated, but it's the same thing. It's the exact same architecture built by the Knights Templar. The Newport Tower has all kinds of astronomical alignments to the sun, lunar, to the stars, to the constellations. I mean, it just goes on and on and on. Why, for God's sakes, why would you have that in a windmill? And for heaven's sakes, a fireplace in a windmill? I mean, it would turn that thing into a bomb with all the I mean, the grain husks that would be floating in the air. I mean, you light a match to that, the thing would literally explode. I mean, how people can call that a windmill is just complete nonsense. And then you have the capstone ledges at the top of the 8 columns on the outside that serve as structural support for the first-story roof of the ambulatory that went around the structure, just like the other Templar churches in Europe. So, look, we don't want to talk about politics and religion, but unfortunately, when you start talking about why is it that these things aren't being accepted, that's why. Politics and religion. That's the reason. And eventually, you have to ask yourself, who are the people that are against this? Well, certain elements of our government are against it, and elements of the Roman Catholic Church, they're absolutely against it. And, I hate to say it, but politics and religion, man, these are the forces that we're up against, and they're not going away. And these are the forces that the Templars fought. These are the forces our founding fathers fought against, and this has been going on with cultures since the beginning of time, politics and religion. And it is what it is, man, and it's unfortunate, but it's the way it is.
And Scott, you also talk about the Orphic egg that's in the Newport Tower, and that is a Masonic architectural feature as well.
It absolutely is, and not only that, I mean, its dimensions correspond to the megalithic yard. If you take the length, the longest length of the egg, right, by the longest width, you add the two together, and then you divide by 12 inches, you get 2.722, which is the megalithic yard, which is the sacred ratio, and it can, those are sacred dimensions of an egg, and it's a perfect shape for strength to protect, the newborn creature, whatever it is, whether it's a bird or it's a reptile or a dinosaur. These ratios are very, very important. They're found in nature, and these are things that the Templars understood. Sacred geometry, mathematics, astronomy, all these things were important to them, and they're absolutely incorporated within the Newport Tower. Now, I'll tell you a few new things that have been discovered. Now, you talk about the Orphic egg, right? I talk about this in my book, The Hooked X. And on the winter solstice, which ironically happens to be my birthday, December 21st. The shortest, darkest day of the year, as my wife Janet likes to say. Not sure why she says that, but anyway, at exactly 9 o'clock in the morning, which just so happens to be an important time of medieval monastic prayer. The Templars were monks, you might recall. The sun rises and the light goes through the southern window, creating a light box. At exactly 9 o'clock, frames out that Orphic egg that you're talking about inside the tower, the only true keystone in the inside of the tower, and it illuminates that light tan granite orb. Why would you do that? Why would you even think to do that in a windmill? I mean, it serves no function other than spiritual, right? It also signals the end of the year, if you will, and the beginning of the coming of spring. It's a very important story that every culture found on the planet throughout time has creation stories, and it's the Isis-Osiris mysteries, it's the Christian story of Jesus, it's the allegorical story of the annual cycle of life on the planet, birth in the spring, death in the fall, resurrection on the winter solstice. And that's what that Orphic egg illuminating on the solstice means. And it's an important human story. Now, on the outside of the tower, on that same archway, back to back with that Orphic egg is another large keystone, a notched keystone. It's called the Mark Master Mason's keystone. And both of those things are back to back. But interestingly enough, they are not centered in the center of the archway. And let me tell you something. No self-respecting stonemason would do that, especially a medieval stonemason. So that begs the question, why is it off by 2.5 degrees? I'll tell you why. Because there's a long-range alignment. And I don't know if you've read my book and you know about this, but if you start at the very center of that tower and you draw a line through the center of those two keystones and you extend it into space to the west, you know where it goes?
To the Kensington Runestone.
It goes to the Kensington Runestone. Now, let me ask you this, Mark. I published that in 2009. It's been exactly a decade since I published the Hooked X and that discovery. Do you think if any of my opponents, and there's plenty of them out there, that would take great joy in proving that wrong by measuring it and publishing a paper and saying Wolter's wrong, do you think that I wouldn't have heard about it by now?
I'm sure you would have been made well aware that you were inaccurate.
Yeah, exactly. You know what I've heard? Crickets.
Nothing. Yeah.
And nothing. And the reason is because it's right. Now, what does that mean? Let's talk about what that means. It means that whoever carved the Kensington Runestone also built the Newport Tower. I mean, isn't that self-evident?
Seems like it, yeah.
Well, yeah. I don't know. I don't know what else you could conclude. So let's just take a look at that. So the Templars are the ones. Here's something else that's interesting. I haven't talked about this yet, but I'll talk about it now. You know the pentatic numbers on the Kensington Runestone?
Okay, yes.
There's 14 of them. There's 14. And isn't that interesting? There's a number 14 carved on the runestone, which is a whole other thing I'll talk about later. But pentatic numbers are Arabic in origin. Why has nobody ever asked the question, what is a Muslim numbering system doing on the Kensington Runestone, which is supposedly a Viking runic inscription? What is a Muslim numbering system doing there? But you didn't even know that.
I didn't know that. But yeah, you can look at the America's Stonehenge episode you did and draw the line to the east, and you get the Phoenician say that could be that's a little bit before the founding of Islam, but yeah, there is
but these
that
numbering
possibility.
systems go back a long ways. I mean, it's basically finger counting, right? And but the thing is what group interacted with Muslims in medieval times? The Templars. In fact, they met in chapter. When they weren't fighting wars, they often met and came to various agreements. They learned from each other. It's no different than stories you hear about in the Civil War, World War I, World War II, where if a Mason gave the grand hailing sign of distress as a prisoner and the guards were Masons, they would take care of them. They would make sure that, first of all, they survived and that they were treated humanely. This didn't start during the Civil War. This has been going on for thousands of years. Freemasonry has been around forever. And so the Templars certainly were Masons, essentially Masons, and they practiced the same values and tenets, and the Muslim Brothers did the same thing. And this needs to be talked about. And I think, quite frankly, when people start to learn about these things, I think it's an opportunity to learn, and it's an opportunity for people of different faiths, of different ideologies, to come together. I mean, that's the way I see it, and that's what I'm going to do, is try to get people to come together today by learning about things that happened in the past.
Okay, Scott, you've been talking a lot about Freemasons and 10 years ago when you published the Hooked X, I think you had an interest in Freemasonry, but in the upcoming episode next week, I think you say that you are now a Mason.
Yes.
Is that correct?
Yes. Basically, my research with the runestone took me to the Templars, and in researching the Templars, Freemasonry came into the equation, immediately. And so I studied Freemasonry for about 10 years prior to publishing the Hooked X. And what I learned, I was impressed. I was very favorably impressed. And, I basically was convinced by the evidence that not only was it a good thing, but it was something I wanted to be part of. And I didn't even realize it, but I came from a Masonic tradition in the history of my family. My dad was a Mason, but he never talked about it with me. I didn't find out he was a Mason until the day after he died, when they cut the ring off his finger and gave it to me. And he was a Shriner. I said, "What the hell's a Shriner?" And I found out from my mother that he was a Mason. So, and I sing the praises of Masonry because I've been convinced myself that it is a wonderful organization, and I think we need more Masons in this country. Quite frankly, it's basically making good men better men, and I don't know what's wrong with that. What could possibly be wrong with that? The other thing about Freemasonry is it teaches people to seek light, and all that is a beautiful way of saying of continuing to learn, to acquire knowledge, to grow as a person intellectually, spiritually, by learning. And a healthy culture, a healthy community of people is one that's highly educated, has mutual respect for each other, and has good values. I mean, who can criticize that? I just don't know how they can.
Okay, well, you demonstrate that in the upcoming episode, where I don't want to give away who the suspect in the
Jack the Ripper
episode
case that's coming up.
Yeah, but he is also was also a Mason.
Yep.
You listen to the information that is presented about him as what shall we say, like being a wayward brother.
Right.
But I don't think you really judge him. You just kind of look at the information and. The information is exonerating him, and there are a few other suspects presented. One of them was the Polish immigrant butcher who had an apron, and I remember when I did my Jack the Ripper tour like 30 years ago. I think it was the same. A suspect was presented by my tour guide. So you do. Just weigh the evidence without really being judgmental.
Well, I mean, you have to be balanced when you do an investigation, and it was pretty easy for me to be objective because I'll be honest with you, I never really paid much attention to the Jack the Ripper story. I find it interesting. I'm not saying it's not an interesting story at all, but I just something I'd never delved into. So I didn't have a horse in the race in any way, shape, or form. And when these two doctors approached me and presented their ideas, I gotta say I found it very interesting. Now, one of the things that happened in the episode in real life is as they were talking about, what the Ripper did to his victims, something became apparent to me that was absolutely a connection to Freemasonry that, quite frankly, as part of the obligations I took, I can't talk about. And I couldn't talk about it with them, and I can't talk about it on the show, and I can't talk about it with you. But what it tells me is that the person that committed these murders was almost certainly a Freemason. Now, I'm not happy to report that, but let's face it, even any Mason will tell you that we're not perfect, and not everybody who becomes a Mason lives a perfect life, and a few of them have gone rogue. One person that in my opinion went rogue was Joseph Smith. He was a Mason, and I don't think he lived up to his vows by any stretch of the imagination. But my job, like you said, is not to criticize these people. My job is to try to figure out if there's enough evidence to make an accusation about somebody. And you really have to be careful too, because our suspect, I'm sure, I don't know this for sure, but I suspect he probably has descendants, as other people that have been suspected have descendants. And unless you get a clear-cut conviction, you can't just go accusing people without potential ramifications and realizing that there may be family members alive today that might not appreciate that.
I understand. And with the episode that aired a couple nights ago,
the Courtney Cave.
Yeah, and you had Valerie with you.
Valerie
still at the library, where she got to see her grandfather's notebooks. I thought that was just one of those just real moments on TV where you get to see someone's emotions about how a relative really changed the lives of people from his contemporaries' lives and really made a difference. That was just compelling TV watching.
Well, I have to say, Mark, that scene with Valerie, and I don't even want to call it a scene because there were a number of things that happened when we filmed, that scene, and it was the most emotionally powerful moment I've ever had filming any television. And I've had some pretty cool moments, I have to say, where I got emotional or, I was fired up beyond belief, But that one was the topper. And, to see her react and to touch that book, to read the words of her ancestor, and, the words, and see the name Harriet Tubman. He worked very closely with her. And to understand what these two did, putting their lives at risk to help other people escape slavery and find freedom, during a really dark period of our nation's history, if you can't be moved by that, you're not human as far as I'm concerned. But let me tell you another interesting story about something that happened that the curator, Dr. Lee Arnold, who was really, he was wonderful. I can't say enough good things about him. He told us a story about, they had a copy that I don't think we showed this. We showed a copy, one of the original drafts of the Constitution, which is incredible enough. But he also showed us one of the 50 copies of the Emancipation Proclamation document that was signed by Abraham Lincoln. And we got to look at that, and I've got pictures of it, and that was just, it was so amazing to see all those things. But he told me a story about an African-American woman who was doing research for a book that, he showed the Emancipation Proclamation document to her. And she asked him, she said, can I touch the signature of Abraham Lincoln? She wanted to touch that signature of the person that, African-Americans, give credit as being a hero that helped end slavery, right? And he said, I would never, ever let anybody touch a document like that. But he said, in this case, I made an exception. And she just ran her finger across his signature, and he said it was just a powerful moment. And it was just a really cool story,
Wow. That. I think in this new season where you've had some a little bit more of these emotional type moments where people are becoming more connected to a personal history than maybe the first 3 seasons on the other network. Is that one of the new things you're trying in this new series?
No, I have to say the answer is no. I think you're right. I think we've had some pretty amazing moments that have happened. The whole thing with Valerie was one of them. But even Chris Courtney, the guy that found the cave, that started the whole thing in the first place. This was a very personal thing for him. He was 12 years old when he chased that salamander and found the cave, and then found the medallion eventually and all that. It was really an emotional thing for him to get answers, and he didn't wear his emotions quite like Valerie did. And you can argue what is more, more deeply touching, I guess, but it was emotional for him. And so when we had that final scene in the bar at the distillery, it was genuine, it was real, and I'm touched by it as much as anybody else. When I got those test results on the alien artifacts, I mean, my God, I went, what? I was genuinely stunned. I mean, I don't know if it came across on the show, but I was dumbfounded. And, you know, and look, at the end of the day, does it prove that this culture interacted with aliens? Well, not yet. We still have to try to falsify that data. Could somebody have faked those results? I think the answer is maybe. I don't know how, but at some point I want to try to figure that out. I will tell you this. You know who Giorgio Tsoukalos is, right?
Yeah, I'm familiar with Giorgio.
Well, Giorgio and I are friends, and you know, all I can tell you is he's a really good guy, and you know, he doesn't take himself too seriously, but obviously he's very good on ancient aliens. He's had a lot of success there, and you know, he texted me personally, and we went back and forth. I'm not going to share what we talked about, but it just goes to show you that there was people watching, and a lot of people were impacted by that. And I thought that was a great episode. And, you know, those jack detectors that I was interacting with, those guys, you know, I really am glad that the episode did not paint those guys out to be, you know, forgers or idiots or, you know, I think it was handled tastefully, because I don't think those guys were perpetrating a hoax. I think those guys found somebody else's practical joke, and they genuinely wanted me to help them figure it out. And obviously that one was an easy one to figure out, but you know, they didn't take offense. They didn't react in a way that was suspicious at all, and I hope that came across. And I guess my point is are we trying to stir emotions more than we did in the past? We're not. I think just the episodes and the scenes we've shot and the people that we've been with have just lended itself to that, and I'm fine with that. You know, I mean, if you connect with people in a human way, I don't know what's wrong with that.
And Scott, also in the new series, you used that gun that
the
analyzes
X-ray fluorescence XRF gun.
That's it. That's a new introduction in this new series. Yeah, so I don't think you had that in the old series. Is this something that was?
We didn't.
Is this a new gadget that just came out in between the first show and this new series?
You know, the XRF gun, we've actually been using at our company for about, at least 5-6 years. But, you know, it's one of those things that, you know, it generates X-rays, so you really have to be careful with it. And the first ones that came out were, you know, you had to have shields on, and now they have it, you know, so that the technology is such that it doesn't have any leakage of X-rays, and it's, you know, it's safe to use like we did. So that technology has been around for a long time, but in a handheld form, that, you know, to use it as conveniently as we did, that's relatively new. The technology itself isn't new, but the handheld convenience that we have, that's new. And safety.
Okay.
And safety.
Okay. And also in the episode from it was the Vikings in Arizona episode. That came out a couple weeks ago, or premiered a couple weeks ago.
That was premiere. Yeah, that would be 2 weeks ago. Yeah.
Okay, and you know, in the first series, you know, brought a lot of scientific explanations to the iron crosses found in Arizona with the caliche on them.
Yeah, the Tucson lead artifacts.
Yeah, and when you return to Arizona for the Vikings, the legend of the Viking ship, you're broadening your scientific explorations of Arizona by looking at the geography of this extension of the Baja Gulf that went into central Arizona towards California.
And Lake Kawia, which is now called the Salton Sea.
Yeah. Can you go into a little bit more detail about the geography that you're incorporating in that episode? I thought that was really interesting.
Right. Well, the thing is that if you take a step back and, right from the get-go, we determined that these are real artifacts. I mean, the testing went great. Even though we got the right test results, doesn't mean that those test results couldn't be replicated in modern times. But then, we had a scholar look at them who was the prevailing expert, and she said, yeah, those are 100% real. So right from the get-go, we've got real artifacts that were found in the desert outside of, Sedona, Arizona. The question is, how did they get there? Well, there's really two possibilities. One is that in modern times, probably a Scandinavian immigrant whose family had a collection of artifacts. They could maybe, going back to the old country, they had them for 100, 200 years, brought them to America, and somehow there's a story that we'll probably never know that they ended up, in a leather saddlebag in the desert. Now, how they got there, we don't know. So it's either a modern immigrant that lost them, or Viking era, most likely Viking era explorers brought them to that area. And if so, is there any evidence to support that? Well, we chased down the legend of a Viking ship that's been around on the internet for a long time. There was a report of a Viking ship that 1,000 years ago, when the Salton Sea was many times larger than it is now, and had an outlet to the Gulf of California that potentially a boat could have taken back then up into Lake Kawia, and eventually either sunk and ended up at the bottom, or was stranded somehow. Who knows what the situation was? And so we got this reel-to-reel tape of this interview for the first television show to air that audio and listen to a first-hand witness who said he saw it back in 1907. The recording was made in the early 1960s when he was an elderly man shortly before he died. So that was pretty cool. And then to go out there and we thought we had it nailed down where the site was, and we didn't find it. But anyway, the search is half the fun. Well, then we went down and looked at a petroglyph that sure looked like a ship to me, and it looked like it had a square sail. It had upturned front and back ends. Looked like it may have had a dragon head carved on the front, and it was carved by the natives who have the Seri Indians have a legend down there of blonde-haired, blue-eyed people that interacted with their people and sailed in a ship. And if you're going to make it, if that Viking ship that does date back 1,000 years and it came to the Lake Kawia at that time, how would it get there? Well, the only way I can think of is it went across the Northwest Passage, around Alaska, down the west coast, around Baja, and up into the Gulf of California, and eventually into the Salton Sea. So it's plausible. Is it likely? Well, I mean, it's a long shot, but it's certainly possible. And this is the evidence that supports that argument. Is it conclusive? No. But is it compelling? I think so.
Scott, when you look at the petroglyph of this like Viking-looking ship, and the Siri Indians are saying, "Oh, hey, this is part of our folklore,
oral history." Yeah.
Yeah, the oral history. Yeah, how much evidence do you give a lot of these stories that have been passed on for generation after generation? Do you think there's a lot of truth behind those stories?
Absolutely, I do. I give a lot. I see no reason not to believe the oral histories of the indigenous people, and I think people don't realize that various tribes have different ways of recording their history. It isn't just mouth to ear. It is mouth to ear, but there are other ways that they record information. The Ojibwa, for example, will write things down on birch bark. Many of the Plains Indians will write things down on buffalo skins or deer skin, and keep very careful records about what their history is. Some native story keepers will have tattoos on their arms with symbols that help them remember their oral histories. So, and you have to also understand that when this information is passed down, it's sacred. This is very important. These people are chosen. They have earned the right to be these story keepers. They're highly respected within their culture, and it's not a telephone game, as some people have said. It's anything but that. And when they receive this information, it's part of a ritual, and it's a multi-sensory experience that it sure as hell isn't the telephone game. It's a sacred passing along of information, and believe you me, these people that are receiving it are paying attention, and it's absolutely reliable, and it's just something that we don't understand because we're not part of that culture, and quite frankly, they have no interest in sharing it with us because of what happened. But what my experience has been is that if you spend time with Native people and you respect their culture and you listen, they're just like anybody else. You treat people the way you want to be treated. You'd be surprised what you get back. No, it's not magic.
Right. We just need more of that today. Scott, you're just talking about the Viking ship that very well may have made its way through the Northwest Passage and down the coast of California and into this inland sea into Arizona, but also in your book, The Hook Decks, you give another example of the similarities in architectural styles between Iceland and Akhenaten in South Dakota, and you have Valdemar Samuelson contributing to your understanding of the Icelandic cairn building and what you saw in South Dakota.
Yeah, well, I mean, it looks to me to be a similar tradition that how it was transferred. I'm not sure, but I bet you if we looked around the world, we'd probably find similar cairns, and where they build them, how they build them, what they symbolize, what they represent, what they're marking. I would bet anything there's going to be an astronomical component to it as well. But these things in many cases are universal, found around the world throughout time, which tells you that there has been a lot of interaction amongst cultures. I mean, I think it makes more sense to me that there was contact and interaction, on a worldwide basis, rather than coincidence. And I'll give you an example. There's a Native American friend that I have who lives in Canada, who told me a story that when he was a young man, his father was highly respected within their tribal community, and he said one day there was a knock on the door, and he went and answered the door, and he said, I'm looking for your father. And he said, and these are his words, not mine. He said it was an Indian from some other continent, and he said he was looking for his father, and he said, well, he's on a trip. He'll be back in a few days. And the guy said, I'll wait. And then another day or two went by, and there was another knock on the door, and there was another guy, another Indian, he said, from another continent. The same thing, I'm looking for your father. And said, well, he'll be back in a day or two. And he said, I'll wait. And by the time his dad showed up, there were 5 guys waiting for him. And his father said to him, I'm going to meet with these guys for a few days, and you're not going to see me here, so don't worry. We have things to talk about. Well, what he learned eventually was that these guys were what they call world elders. And basically what it means is there is one person in the indigenous people that represents each continent around the world. And they meet in council to this day. How often do you think they meet? Can you guess? I'll give you a clue.
I once a year?
Nope. It's a number of years, and the number of years is extremely sacred to Native Americans, to indigenous people around the world, and to the Templars. And I'll give you one more clue.
8.
Newport Tower.
8.
Yeah, that's. I'm thinking it's 8.
You got it.
Because of the pillars.
You got it. Every 8 years they meet and basically talk about the status of the world and the various cultures. Unfortunately, when they met that year, and this was many decades ago now, a couple of the he said in recent decades, he said some of the representatives did not make it, and he said that was not a good sign. And by the way, the person that told me that story, he inherited that job from his father.
Okay. Are they going to be meeting?
North America.
Are they going to be meeting soon?
I don't know. I don't feel it's my place to ask too many questions, but I think if I asked him, he'd probably tell me.
Okay. Or do they discuss the conclusions publicly?
Not that I'm aware of.
Okay. Well,
I think what happens is each representative reports back to their council that probably represents various countries, the different people, and that information, whatever information they're allowed to share or they want to share is shared. I don't know exactly how it works, but there has to be some tradition of how they disseminate that information.
Okay. Well, I'd be interesting to see what they all have to say.
I'd love to know what they have to say, but I think I can figure out what it is. That there's there's too many people that aren't living in balance with Mother Nature, and again, I don't want to delve into politics, but let's face it, there's a lot of discussion today about global warming and climate change, and loss of species, and I think you'd be a fool to say that we're not taking care of our planet. And I guess what I say to people is, why would you take a chance, any chance, with your home? Why would you mistreat where you live? This is our home, and why would you take any risk with it whatsoever? And I just that to me transcends politics. But yet here it is; it's become a political issue, and I just don't think it should be. I think we should all be on the same page, taking care of our home. It's that simple. And I know that's what natives. I know natives believe that for sure. I've heard that from them many times. And if there's any culture in the world that lives in balance with their environment better than Native Americans, I don't know who it is.
Yeah,
and
we can't
indigenous
move.
people around the world.
Yeah, there's not a second Earth we can move to.
You just don't do it. You just don't take a risk. You just don't do it.
Yeah.
That's my opinion.
Scott, unfortunately, we only have 30 minutes left. And
my gosh, is an hour and a half gone by that quick?
Yeah, I just happened to glance down my watch, and I was like, oh, gee, there's so many other things we need to get to.
Okay, well, you fire away. I sort of get on tangents sometimes. I apologize, but
okay,
especially things I feel strongly about,
Okay, we could go on a rant with the fracking stuff, but we could save that for another time. When your new book comes out. But you have this interesting article in Ancient American 116 about this gold lamella found in Maine.
Family, that's amazing. Yeah, that's a great piece.
What's the story behind that? This is another one of the spirit ponds, rune stones, and some of the other topics you've the Tucson crosses, where you get these early forms of writing in America. What kind of writing is this on the lamella?
I wish I could tell you. I've reached out to various, organizations, the Midwest Epigraphic Society, and other groups that I'm affiliated with that have done a lot of work with these ancient scripts, and they have no idea. I mean, what these things traditionally are. The Phoenicians oftentimes would have these gold lamleys that they would roll up just like this one was found, and they would put them inside little leather pouches around their neck, and they would wear it, as an amulet or a charm, if you will, for protection. Obviously traveling the world on the oceans is dangerous business, and many people died on the oceans. That's not a new phenomenon. That's been going on for thousands of years. So that's the most likely explanation for what that is, but the language is unknown, and the symbols on it are unknown, and it's probably a prayer for protection, but we have not figured out what the language is and what the script is. It's a mystery. But I can tell you this, it's 99.9% pure gold, and it's, it was totally encrusted with secondaries when it was pulled out of the ocean. He was metal detecting, and actually he found it early in the season at extreme low tide at Kennewick Beach, and he put it in his bag where he puts the things that he finds when he's metal detecting, and it got stuck in the seam, and he forgot about it. And it wasn't until the end of the season when he was cleaning his bag out and putting his stuff away, for winter, that he found it again and, figured out what it was. So it's 100% legit as far as I'm concerned, and it was in the surf for, in the sand on the beach for an awfully long time, and it begs the question, how did it get there? Whose was it? What time period? if we could figure out the script, I think we'd have a good chance of dating it.
And so we just don't know how to identify what kind of writing or what even culture it's related to. It's just it's interesting artwork, or it's captivating. I just don't know what it is.
Well, like I say, I think I've told you all I can tell you about what it probably is, but do we know for sure? We don't. We just don't know. But at some point, I suspect, if we get an opportunity to do more shows, I would love to look into that, to look into it more.
Oh, okay. What I know you can't talk about all the other upcoming episodes on the new season, but what are some things we can expect?
Well,
just like some general
there's some
teasers.
Great stuff that's coming. You will definitely see an episode about Templars. You will see there's if you want to Google the Haymarket Affair, we do an episode on that, and that episode is absolutely fantastic. And I can't wait till I can talk about that, because some things happened during the investigation that turned our original path in a completely different direction, which is how investigations go. New evidence might take you in a different direction, and you follow the evidence trail. And so that was pure scientific method, and that was great. Trying to think. We we look into the legend of Sir Francis Drake, British explorer who was on the west coast of America back in the late 1500s, and that episode is going to be. There was some pretty raw emotion in that one too. But there's some really good episodes coming up. I can't even remember them all. I've been working so hard, and I just got back from the last episode that we shot on Sunday, and it was in Newfoundland. And man, what a beautiful place! What a cool new inscription that we found that the world doesn't know about. So get ready, folks. It's going to be great. The rest of the season is really, really good. I'm biased, of course, but if you liked what we already showed, you're going to see things that are just that good, and some are better.
Okay. And throughout your Hooked X and Akhenaten to the Founding Fathers book, you draw attention to like the dotted R and architectural features like the M and W on like the Gotland churches, like little eaves above the
right
windows. A lot of your work deals with these just really unique details. Do you have more of those kinds of finds in the new season as well?
Absolutely, and there's a lot more to come as well. In my business doing material forensics, you've heard the phrase "the devil's in the details." Well, the truth is in the details, and you have to pay attention to every little thing. I mean, sometimes the smallest little clue can lead to the biggest discoveries, and that's just the kind of work I do. I'm detail oriented, and that's just the way I'm wired, and it's really helped me in my work, and it's helped me in my investigations. And the people that the one thing that I figured out a long time ago when I was doing my Templar research is that if you can understand the way people's minds work, then you can start to predict some of the things that they will do. And this is it goes to the core of the Hooked X and the Templar research that I've done, and a lot of and the Native American research, because they share a similar ideology and thought process, and they venerate, the heavens and math and geometry and astronomy, and these are the things that we're taught in Freemasonry. It's the same tradition that we have in Masonry, and that's one of the reasons why I wanted to become a Mason, is it helped me in my research. And man, you'll read in my new book an amazing discovery that I made when I went through one of the degrees of the Yorkite tradition. And it taught me and really provided the final clue to the puzzle, that helped me completely understand the Kensington runestone and helped me understand that most of the inscription is allegory. There are no 10 dead men. It's an allegory for the Ark of the Covenant, which contains the 10 Commandments, right? And so when in Freemasonry you learn a whole different language and way of communicating through symbols, through allegory, through code. And if you're not initiated, in other words, if you're not taught how to understand those clues, that language, if you will, you're never going to understand it. You'll never see it. And that's been the problem with scholars trying to study the Kensington runestone. They didn't understand that it wasn't, the entire thing wasn't meant to be taken literally. There is some literal information within it, but there's all kinds of allegory and code and symbols. And if you don't know how to read them, you'll never get the whole story.
Okay, that does seem pretty characteristic of medieval writing. You look at examples like the A Voyage of St. Brendan, just the different allegories, and probably Chaucer. Chaucer would be a little bit kind of contemporary with the Kensington runestone. But there's a lot of allegory writing that it just all seems like it fits together. So that's an interesting point that you're bringing up.
It
makes a lot more sense.
What you're saying is it makes sense to you, right?
Yes.
Well, let me give you an example of an allegory that is really controversial, but in my opinion is true. I mean, probably the greatest document that's essentially allegory is the Bible. I mean, it's and I'll give you an example. I mean, the resurrection story of Jesus in the tomb, right? How many days was Jesus in the tomb?
But 3.
And when he comes out, who sees him? Mary Magdalene, right?
Mary Magdalene.
Right. In certain traditions, she's known as his wife. Okay. So what's the allegory? So he is the Son of God who has been resurrected, or who rises again after 3 days, right? Well, I would argue that story is not true. I would argue that story is an allegory. And the allegory is of the sun on the winter solstice when it stands still, is in hiding. It's at its lowest point. It's the darkest days of the year on the 20th, 21st, and 22nd of December. And then what happens? The days start to get longer, right? But if you go back in time, people didn't understand this. They didn't know. They had rituals that they performed in earnest because they thought that would help make the sun come back. But in mystical circles, you study the sun and the resurrection of the sun on the winter solstice after 3 days. And who is the eternal traveler with the sun? The planet Venus.
Moon? Oh, okay.
Venus, the eternal traveler. And in mystical circles, they are the emblematic of male and female and the concept of dualism, right? The concept of opposites that keep things in balance. And male-female, this dualism is represented by the sun and Venus. She is always there with her consort, the sun. So when the Son of God, Jesus, is resurrected, and he comes out of the tomb after 3 days, and he is risen, right? Who's there? His consort, Mary Magdalene. That's not a coincidence. And so there's much more to that, of course, but that's just one example of a simple allegory that on one level means one thing to people of a certain tradition, and to those who have been initiated, it means something completely different, something more pragmatic and understandable. And again, back in ancient times, they kept very close track of all these things because it was a matter of life and death. You had to know when to plant your crops. You had to know when to harvest them. You needed to know when the sun was going to return and spring would return. So these things were all documented, and there were rituals associated with them and stories. And so when you understand them and this whole concept of allegorical stories and information, it really helps you understand how the world works and how people operate and their beliefs and everything else.
Okay. Well, I can see how you just have a whole new vision after becoming initiated, and the inscription that you provide in the early stages of the Hook X, just with the 10 dead people who passed away from the like plague type illness.
Well, that was before I was initiated. That seemed to be, make the most sense to me. And remember,
at that time,
nowhere in the inscription does it say anything about the natives killing these men. People have assumed that for 100 years. Well, they must have been killed by the natives. And if you really spend any time at all thinking about it, it makes absolutely no sense at all. First of all, there's no mention of Native Americans, Skraelings, savages, anything in the inscription. There's no mention of Native Americans at all. The other thing that people don't think about is in the 14th century, there is no way in this earth that any culture is going to get to the center of the continent, which in itself is an interesting fact, the geographic center, the exact geographic center of the continent, unless the natives let you. There's no way they fought their way to Kensington. This just underscores what I've been saying for a long time, that they traveled with them. So, you have to think about it like that. But, before I was initiated, the thing that made sense to me was the plague. They could have brought plague with them, and maybe 10 of their men died. I don't know. But now I know that. It was
more of a literal. Yeah, you had more of a literal translation than just over the last.
And that's just not the case.
Yeah, and over the last 10 years, you've just evolved or whatever term you want to use.
I've learned and I've grown. And, again, I can't underscore enough that part of the problem with scholarship on the Kensington runestone is, and it boils down to this, Mark, and listen carefully, because this really sums up the runestone research, but it sums up a lot of the research in many other instances as well. For 120 years, scholars have been trying to tell the Kensington runestone what it's supposed to be, instead of letting the artifact tell them what it is. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
They said it's a runestone.
Interesting.
Yeah, and so it must conform to their understanding of what a runestone is. No. It's an inscription that has runes, okay? Fact. But it has a lot of other stuff. And just because it has this other stuff that doesn't conform to what you guys say a runestone must be doesn't mean that it's wrong. And that's what they've been saying. No, that's not science. And, of course, what I find so interesting is these guys, call themselves scientists. They're not scientists. It's nonsense. But anyway, I digress. But you get the point.
It's more like where Bill Mann makes the points about the Poussin paintings that have the like the Shepherd of Arcadia. It's more of a artistic interpretation, not just these are the facts. 10 guys died. Well, no. If you look at the philosophy, there's a more symbolic way of expressing a concept.
Well, there's a lot more. There's a lot more to these things than people think. Oh,
right.
It's just all the things that we have within Freemasonry is just a whole new set of tools that I just didn't even know exist. And, I'm not the first person, and the people that initiated me aren't the first people to understand these things. This is ancient knowledge that goes back thousands of years. And I just have to say that I'm thrilled that, I was deemed worthy enough to join this institution, and I'm proud as heck, and it's opened so many new doors to understanding that I just didn't even know were there.
Okay. It sounds like you and Barb are going to have a lot more to continue with next week when you return. But as we get, we have like 8 minutes left. For maybe some of our listeners in Barnsley, England. Okay, so you're walking around London with your backpack on. That looks pretty American. It's not the walking around in the city of London with
the backpack. You know the backpack has a name, don't you?
What's that?
Trusty.
Trusty,
my trusty
backpack.
That. So when we were doing the show, it just became, hey, where's your trusty backpack? Where's Trusty? And I started calling him Trusty. Get me Trusty. Where's Trusty? And that's my thing, man. It's my backpack, and it's getting pretty weathered. It's got holes in it now, and I'm either going to get it fixed or get a new one if we get another season. But it's been all around the world, and of course I pull everything and anything out of that thing. You never know what's going to come out of Trusty.
That was where I was going. Okay, so when you're walking around London or the Arizona desert, like, what's the stuff you usually have in Trusty?
Well, I have my computer. Depending on where we're going, I'll have a rock hammer with me. I have my hand lens all the time. I've got a notebook. I've got a flashlight. I've got a magnet. I've got my hydrochloric acid. I've got, oh my gosh, there's all kinds of things. Sometimes I'll bring the XRF gun. I've always got a rain jacket. I've got cameras. I got my portable microscope. I've got pens, of course. I've got sunscreen. I've got a little first aid kit. I've got, chargers in there. I've got computer cords. I got all kinds of stuff. So it's got everything, man. There's a lot more I'm not even thinking about, too. So.
Okay. It's a little bit of the behind-the-scenes stuff of America Unearthed. It's just fun to learn things like that. Okay, so yeah, you're looking at like early fall for the release of your upcoming book. Is that right?
Well, actually, I'm going to have books that I'll be selling on my website within a couple of weeks. I mean, the official release date is September, but it's at the printer right now, and I'll have books before that. So, if people are interested in getting the book, they can go on my website, which is www.hookedx.com, HOOKEDX.com, and I sign every book that's bought off my website. Otherwise, you can get it on Amazon or go to the publisher, which is North Star Press of St. Cloud.
Okay. And do you have any upcoming appearances? Besides speaking engagements, not the TV shows.
Well, I don't. I've got a lot of invitations. I'm going to be speaking at a Masonic event in Sioux Falls next weekend, but that's a Masonic event there. Won't be open to the public, but I really haven't booked anything because I've been making shows, and if things go well and if we're fortunate enough to get renewed, then we would probably go into production right away. So I haven't been able to schedule anything because I just didn't know what was going to happen. But as soon as I know if we don't get renewed, then I'll go on the speaking tour. I got a really good lecture, and I think this is the best book I've ever done. There's no doubt in my mind. And I can't wait to get out and promote it. And if we're going to make more shows, then I probably won't be doing any speaking for a while, except on the show.
Okay, and what's the title of your new book? It's the Cryptic Code. Is that right?
Cryptic Code of the Templars in America, and the subtitle is Origins of the Hooked X Symbol. I'm telling you, Mark, we've got some fantastic reveals that we're going to have in this book that are going to rock the world. And I'm not kidding.
Okay. Barbara has you Monday. I think it's Monday, and I don't know if we could get it done by then, but we'll have you back on. We'll read it and we'll have you back on and review it.
Absolutely. I as soon as I get copies, I'll be sending out promo copies, and I'll be happy to get you a copy. And I think you're going to enjoy it. If you like the Hooked X, you like Akhenaten, you're going to love this.
Yeah. Okay. Cool. I'm into it. I just really like the seeing things allegorically. I thought that was really interesting. I've worked with Michael Carter, and he's saying, not everything's literal in the Bible. You have like a lot of the symbols from the Book of Revelation needs to be understood as an allegory. So what you're saying is all helping me to put all this